Let's talk about one important Warhammer 40k skill that maybe gets much less coverage than most, but is perhaps one of the biggest and most useful money-saving things when it comes to either growing a collection or getting rid of models that you no longer use. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where in this video I thought I'd do a quick overview of one very important tool that I feel is underappreciated by hobbyists out there, and that's the pretty powerful ability to be able to resell miniatures in a fairly efficient way, which can have some pretty big applications both as you're growing a collection and of course can recoup a massive amount of value out of a Warhammer collection even after you've modelled, painted, assembled and maybe had years of use out of them. I'd say perhaps reselling models is a little bit underrated as a skill in Warhammer collecting, as it maybe tends to be a little bit on the negative side. Getting discounts on models that you're buying in generally feels all rather positive as you're growing collections and getting more miniatures in your army, whereas perhaps selling well is maybe a little bit less exciting, even if it is unlocking some funds to get some new and cool models. In general, Warhammer 40k is generally considered to be at least a fairly expensive hobby, just for the amount of money that you pay for the amount of model soldiers that you get out of it. But if you look at the entire life cycle of the miniature, and say eventually where you might be many years down the line and you choose to resell things because you're no longer interested in that army, or you might be choosing to scale down a Warhammer army to do other things, typically Games Workshop model prices tend to hold their value to perhaps a surprising extent, perhaps partly due to the very high secondary market demand that people have on them, as people are really looking for any discounts they can get to buy Games Workshop's pricey model soldiers. If you've got 40k miniatures that are either at least fairly nicely painted or fairly thinly painted, in general on eBay they will really tend to hold their value, often going for around about 60 to 80% retail price from Games Workshop. Sometimes if the model is hard to acquire because Games Workshop doesn't have enough stock in, or you happen to have painted the model particularly nicely, you might even get prices that are in excess of what Games Workshop might have sold them for originally, particularly if you might have got them from a discount box or something originally. It means that perhaps in Dangerous Theory land, Warhammer miniatures that you buy from Games Workshop might only wind up costing you around about 50% what you actually pay for on the box, if you do look after a collection well, and if the time came when your interest in the hobby wasn't quite as much as the value of the money that you wanted out of them, or you needed to free up funds or free space or something, then you could potentially cash out and get a reasonable amount back even after using the models for years and years. As well as just selling off older models, which can definitely be helpful if you're sure that you're done with them. It can also be quite helpful when you're just growing a collection in general. Say for example, Games Workshop has quite a lot of discount boxes with multiple units bundled together, sometimes from two different factions. If you're well used to selling off individual squads and units, it's really quite a powerful tool to be able to say, yes, I'm buying that box set, I don't really want the extra squad of intercessors because I've got loads of those already. They can go on eBay and recoup a fair bit of value, and then I can essentially wind up with the other miniatures in the box vastly cheaper than they would have otherwise been. The same sort of thing can apply to if you made an army purchase from friends or off eBay with some second-hand models. If there's some things that you just don't think that you'd use or you haven't really got much interest in, then they can go too and make the overall deal far better. There's definitely a whole ton of ways that you can sell miniatures, but I thought I'd share the way that I like most. After having been collecting Warhammer for really quite a long time, and for a period before starting the channel I did tend to buy and sell eBay miniatures online, usually buying in big armies, fixing them up a bit and selling off in individual units for a profit. Though that did tend to get eaten into a bit by keeping random models for my own collections, it was how I wound up acquiring a slightly scary amount of Cadian infantry for my guard, at a fairly small fraction of the cost that it would have been through Games Workshop. In any case, my current preferred method for selling miniatures is via eBay. Generally, you're likely to get the most value if you divide an army into individual units, as in general most people aren't really that interested in the random big collection of miniatures that you've got. You'll have some things they do want, some things that they don't. So if you want to try and recoup maximal value, going unit by unit is going to be better, though it is a bit more time and effort compared with just photoing the entire army in one go and listing it as just one job lot. Depends on whether or not the extra value that you get out of it is going to be worth the slight extra time and effort and posting lots of parcels off rather than just one big one. In any case though, for individual items, I usually like to price them up by going to eBay and checking the sold items tag. There's a little filter checkbox that you can use for that, and then you can search for things that are roughly the same as the unit that you'd like to sell, and see what similar items have actually achieved rather than just all the ones that are listed that might be at far too high prices. For the options for selling things on eBay, I usually prefer to use the buy it now rather than auctions, and I'd initially list it as slightly above the regular asking price that units tend to sell for, give people a chance to see if they want to buy it at that price, and then usually each week drop the price by around about 5 or 10% until someone eventually buys it. If you leave a reasonable gap in between each price drop, then you'll give people a chance to see if they want it at the new price, so it should go for the maximum amount that people are willing to pay for, and not risk underperforming by too much like you can get with auctions. It's fairly easy to see what works well as an eBay auction online. Take a few clear pictures of the squad and the individual models, generally well written against a neutral sort of background, and clearly list any faults or issues with the miniatures in the item description. It'd be far more hassle than it's worth if people are trying to send things back because they're faulty because you haven't mentioned something. Posting miniatures away is definitely something that people can be a bit apprehensive of. It could be a bit more of a risk for more fragile models out there. You need at least a somewhat sturdy box and plenty of bubble wrap. The main aim being that when the item's all sealed away and wrapped in the bubble wrap, if you give the box a good shake, then you don't want it rattling about at all, otherwise it's going to reach the other person all broken and they're going to be unhappy. You can just keep things simple with internal postage, or you can potentially use eBay's global shipping program or work out international postage yourself. Though if you're doing that, you just need to look up what sort of price you'd be expected to pay. Postage overseas can be a lot more than you might expect if the model's kind of heavy. I'd also be sure to put a return address on the box as well, just in case of the parcel being undelivered, so it should come back to you if there's any issues for some reason, though I find that kind of rare. Otherwise, definitely plenty of other options for selling Warhammer or other miniatures. For the other options from eBay, auctions can be kind of handy for quicker sales as well. They just tend to be a little bit more random, and if the starting price is a bit too high, you might get things just completely unsold. Or if you put it on for very cheap, then you just might wind up with the risk that it sells below an acceptable price that you might have got otherwise. Most things that are at least fairly in demand, like popular models from common factions, tend to go for a fairly stable amount though. Otherwise, for other ways of reselling miniatures, you could sell things locally to friends. Could be worth putting some feelers out on local social media groups or group chats and things, or even places like Facebook Marketplace. If you're just looking to get rid of units or armies fairly quickly and efficiently, then that can be an okay way. You wouldn't have to worry about postage or fees or anything, though you might get a bit less than market value. So there might be a bit of a money trade-off with it. Otherwise, forums and things can be an option, though I'd usually try and go with people who've actually got an established reputation and aren't just looking out to scam you. And increasingly, there's really quite a lot of game shops and companies that offer trade-in type schemes for older Warhammer. Say, for example, the Troll Trader in the UK is really quite a well-known one. Usually their deal is that they'll give you a quote for miniatures that you could sell to them. Again, very nice and easy and efficient, though again it is likely to be a little bit less than you might be able to get otherwise selling models individually on eBay, as typically they're going to be looking to do a similar sort of thing to that, and there needs to be some price differential between the two to make a profit. There's definitely plenty of reasons that people do sell up in Warhammer. You might be not engaged with the hobby or the army quite as much. People move on and times and interests do change a bit. Some people get tired of Games Workshop for various reasons. We might need the physical space or money more just due to real life issues. Perhaps moving house, or ideally wanting the money more than you want to have a reserve army in your collection that you haven't used in a long time. People definitely jump around and like to collect different factions in 40k as well. Lots of people sell up one army with the intention to jump into another. Can be quite a good option for people who just want to have the fun of collecting a different army. They'll probably avoid things like power in game as a reason for selling and reselling things, unless you happen to be some sort of top tournament player chasing the meta around. Overall, I do think that being able to resell things is a really quite powerful tool though, and it is quite nice to know that you could convert a whole bunch of your collection back into cash fairly easily if you needed to. I'd probably be a little bit cautious as to being one of the people who just keeps on buying armies and reselling them though. I have often seen people who have just tended to go through really quite a lot of 40k armies over the years, buy quite a lot of kits, build most of them up, but then go on to get bored of them to go on to the next project. It's not the end of the world if the main aim is just to keep you with a steady supply of plastic miniatures to paint up. But say compared with someone who tended to hold on to their miniatures over the long term, you're probably going to wind up with a far smaller collection at the end of the day, as you'll just lose at least a little bit of value each time you trade armies out and buy new stuff. I think whether or not you go into all out sell an army can be a bit of a tricky decision really. You both need to consider how you feel about the miniatures now and how much you're using them at the moment, but also whether or not you could see yourself coming back to them and jumping back in. Whether it might be at 40k's next balance update or the next codex that you get for the army, or even several years down the line. Particularly for people who put loads of time and effort into painting their miniatures, as well as just the financial cost, you might be paying a bit of a hobby cost as well. Loads of cool work to make your army look nice might be down the drain if you're just starting from scratch again. In any case, let me know your thoughts on selling miniatures in Warhammer 40k. I'll certainly be interested to hear your experiences, both in deciding whether to sell and how you've gone about doing so. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.